Hello, I'm Patty Lang, Deaf Spotlight's Executive Director. I'm thrilled to welcome the many incredible artists who have contributed their artwork to our upcoming fundraiser on September 12th. I'd like to give a warm welcome to Takiyah Harris. Taki?
Growing up, I faced many challenges. When I was a young baby, less than a year old, I developed spinal meningitis. That's how I became deaf. At that time, that was about the 1970s to late 1980s, there really wasn't great medical access to care. Those services weren't readily available. So my mom asked the doctor what she should do about me, and the doctor recommended speech therapy and lip reading. My mom wasn't so sure about it, but she took their advice, and she enrolled me in speech therapy. And the goal there was to learn to lip read, to learn to recognize language. Still, there was a lot of language missing, a lot of language deprivation. There wasn't enough education included. There wasn't enough support and access included. That's why my mom decided to move to Illinois. She heard about a deaf program there. She said, my daughter really needs communication access. Now understand, I did already have some basic language and awareness. I knew it was really important to have that visual input and access to communication. I did not have a deaf identity at that time. Common terms were deaf and dumb, hearing impaired. Deaf was not really a popular term used at that time. So I did have my Black culture, but I did not really have a deaf cultural identity at that time. When I went to that school, the teacher said they use a method called total communication, which is signing and speaking at the same time, using signed exact English, basically, and initialized signs. That is the approach that school system used. In that school, I experienced a lot of racism and oppression. My culture was diminished. My esteem fell. I couldn't speak up. I felt punished. I felt like I had done something wrong. When I got home, I told my mom about some of my experiences, and she was shocked that her daughter, who is deaf, who is Black, who is female, now has 3 strikes against her. My first strike is experiencing racism as a Black person, experiencing oppression as a woman, experiencing oppression as a deaf person. All of that I had to endure through my time in school. Now, when I got to the 6th grade, we had new teachers. One teacher looked at me and decided I would stay on the same grade and just go up 1 step. And I thought I was really capable to do the work. So the teacher worked with me one-on-one, and I did learn quite a bit more in that way. Around the 8th grade, a really good teacher came and looked at me and said, why is she learning this? That curriculum, that material is not appropriate. She should be on grade level. I was shocked. She picked up the content and threw it right in front of their face. My eyes almost fell out my head. I was shocked. She said I should be up reading more advanced level reading and having access to higher curriculum. I told my mom, listen to me. I really don't want to go through this another year fighting this school system, especially going into high school. I just don't want to deal with it. And the teacher told my mother about a deaf school, a deaf program nearby. Now, my mom was concerned. I was her only daughter. She does have a son, but I'm the only girl. And I'm deaf. And I'm Black. And sending me alone without her was tough. But that teacher really did try to convince her that it would be a really good place for me to go. So she found the strength to let me go. It was really difficult for my mom. I think when I was growing up, we always assumed that deaf schools were for the dumb. But this teacher explained to me, be patient. You know, go there, be open to learning. And if you don't like it in a year, you can come back home and we'll look for another school that's a better fit. So I went to that new school and everyone was signing ASL fluently. I'm coming from a background with signed English, total communication method. And I tried to socialize with other people and I used the word hearing impaired or the sign. And they said, no, get rid of that. We're deaf. They emphasized that deaf identity. And they said, look, you're deaf. That's it. No discussion. And that's when I really started to grow and blossom and open up. I developed leadership skills there. So many benefits from being in a deaf, sign-rich environment. And I've just been going on from there. When I was growing up, I used to watch my older brother. He also had a hobby tied to art. He liked the DC Marvel Comics universe and had comic books out all the time. I thought those graphic novels were so cool. We could look at them and envision and see what was happening. And I really liked how the artist depicted physical form. For example, how women would stand boldly. And I said, why do they have women standing with their arms like that, in that shape and the boldness? Look at the women in your family. Do any of us stand with our arms up like that? But that wasn't the point. And then we looked at the men and how the men stood in their confidence pose with their fierce expression exuding power. He would say, that's how you emphasize that this is someone who's a hero. Remember, our dad used to be in the Navy, and he would stand similar to this with that type of structure and confidence. Now, my parents separated when I was 5, so I don't remember my dad as much as my older brother does. But he explained that, and I looked at it more and more and fell in love with it. Eventually, I turned to colors. Pinks, yellows, reds, oranges. I began to experiment with colors and mixing colors. And then I moved on to clothes for my Barbie dolls, but they had to be loud and bright colored clothing. I thought of different things I could become when I was an adult. A nurse, a teacher, different things that are common for children, but I really wanted to do something creative. When I went to middle school, I went to my local public high school in a mainstream program. There was a competition that year. Someone came to me and said, I know you like to draw. I've seen you draw comic strips before, and some of what you draw can make people laugh. Come up with a slogan. They really emphasized that the slogan needs to be something that will be humorous, that will make people laugh. And I said, to be honest, I've just been drawing other people's artwork. I've been copying what's already out there. It's not original. But at that time, I went ahead and copied something from a popular strip at the time. I added the school symbol to the costume, and I won 4th place. The teacher came up to me and said, hey, you won 4th place. Keep it up. She gave me some feedback on different ways to design costumes, different types of dialogue I could put in my strips. And that was great. And then eventually I went into a sewing class. But that time period is about when I really fell in love with art. And eventually I thought about going to RIT. Now at that time I chose to study optics. The technical parts were fine. I really, wasn't as interested in that. The scientific terminology was easy for me, but I had to be honest. I wasn't happy in that program. I let them know that I really thought I would be designing frames. I like designing frames for glasses. They told me I was in the wrong program. I should go to art or photography. And all of the instructors in the program really missed me. I really enjoyed my time with them. I had good grades, but I did leave that department and transfer to the arts department. And it was challenging. Of course, as I continued through my studies, it became more and more challenging. I took a multimedia arts class. I really did enjoy that. We did graphic design as well as other media. And eventually I transferred to Southeastern Illinois University to complete a bachelor's degree. At that university, they teach real-world skills regarding graphic marketing. Very different from my experience at RIT. Here we looked at marketing, at presenting a product, at convincing people. It was challenging. It really forced me to think differently. I had to learn how to present. I had to learn how to stand in front of people and try to persuade. I had to learn about business. All of these new skills became part of my skill set. Someone suggested the radio television program. PBS had a program there. And it was suggested to me because of my high levels of creativity and my understanding of reality. It was suggested that I look at the radio TV program as an additional program. So I reached out to them. I looked at my prerequisite studies that were necessary for their program and applied, and I was accepted to the radio and television program. I'm really glad I did it. I learned so much about PBS, who sponsors many, many different types of programming. My favorite part was film, learning about Ken Burns. He was an amazing filmmaker, cinematographer. His visualizations and presentation and editing of history, that just could not be topped. And PBS sponsored him. That was such an impressive experience. I did eventually graduate. At that time, I didn't pass math, but we had up to 7 years to complete our curriculum and finished with my bachelor's. So for a while, I went out into the world of mental health. Of course, I had to add arts at that time. So as I was working with clients or individuals in the programming, I would add art to our interactions. They were always excited about that part. It was what we would consider art therapy, processing your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, and getting it out into your artwork. One of my previous supervisors, who was a psychologist, said that you should work in a psychiatric hospital. There you could serve an internship and work with clients with psychological needs. And I thought to myself, this is a new opportunity. But of course, I needed to finish my studies. I needed my bachelor's degree. My mom made sure I wouldn't forget. So I transferred to an additional university and did complete 2 bachelor's degrees. One was a Bachelor's of Science in Graphic Design and Art History. The other was in photography. So, 2 bachelors, which means I can teach art. And I went and taught in the hospital. Now I'll share how I got into haptic arts. I was working with more and more individuals who are deafblind, and I would give them paints when we did these art therapy sessions, and a few of them said they couldn't feel anything. Of course, they could feel the paper, the thickness of the paper, and if I used the googly eyes, they could feel those. there's some sound when you shake those eyes and you can feel those vibrations. And if I use the soft palms, they could feel those. But I decided to listen to their feedback. I went to my mom's home area in Illinois, just outside of Chicago, went to a Dollar Tree store. I closed my eyes and I reached out my hands and began to feel the art materials. At that time, I got it. I collected all kinds of materials that could be used that had dimension to them and tactile to them. I collected about $30 worth, whatever I thought my supervisor would cover financially. I brought them out and laid them on the table, and the deafblind individuals began to feel them, and they were so excited. They really got into the art project after that. At that time, I was focused on collage art. When I talked to my internship supervisor, they said that what you're doing is not collage work. I didn't understand why. They said, no, this is haptic art. I said, well, what is haptic art? When they began to explain it to me, I knew that was it. Collage is two-dimensional. It's flat. Haptic art has dimension. It pops off of the page. After that, I really delved into that, and that became my world of art. Communication equity. When you look at society today, so much has changed. It's had such an impact on people. When you look at the American with Disabilities Act, the ADA, which was passed in 1990, that was helpful. But as time went on, people began to forget about individuals with disabilities. I was talking to my mom. My mom is a case manager for people with disabilities. She was so frustrated, and she shared her heart with me. She said that disability rights are not loud enough in the community. And I said, but Mom, what do you mean? She said, I'm not talking about just the deaf and hard of hearing community. I'm talking about disability rights in general. They're weak. But I countered that the ADA has been law since 1990. And she said it's not enough. Look at Medicare. Those cuts are hurting people with disabilities. The government and the political system is killing them. She was very upset. My mother has given up her time and effort supporting people with disabilities throughout the community for a long time. And I have worked related to mental health. And we know insurance is an issue. In the state of Illinois, it is unfortunate that mental health services funding has been cut so much. That even led to me being laid off from my work. And that caused me to relocate and move to Framingham, Massachusetts. I'm working at a school here that's tied to the Learning Center. I've become a sub, and I've also worked at another location, the Horace Mann School for the Deaf, which is just outside of Boston. But I have invested so much in mental health, in community equity. But I'm seeing in our community so many deaf and hard of hearing individuals saying that it's not enough. We need to get louder. When they apply for apartments, they're having problems with the process and being accepted and experiencing discrimination. When they try to access medical care, they can't get interpreting services. Services that are needed 24/7 are not available. Those demands and concerns were made known to me, and I took that on. And then there came Black Lives Matter, which was very loud and got a lot of attention. With all of those pieces moving on and coming into me and impacting me personally, I had to get it out in my art. And I made this loud piece that I'm sharing now.